Okay, ready? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أيها الأحباب الكرام السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to this series of videos which we have entitled Back to Revelation. The meaning of this title may be relatively apparent. However, as instructed by our resident scholar Sheikh Muhammad Al-Mas'ari, we will take the first few minutes of this video to explain exactly what we mean by Back to Revelation, why it is so important, and its practical implication. You, the respected viewer, may not agree entirely or indeed at all with our thinking or the rest of the content of this or other videos. Irrespective of whether this is the case or not, we would always welcome your feedback, criticisms and questions sent to the email address given below. Without further ado then, Shaykh, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Please give us some context to the title of this series, Back to Revelation, and why you wish to do this.
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin wa sahabati al-mursalin mujahideen wa ba'd. So praise to Allah, the Lord and owner and the creator of the whole universe and all possible universes, and praise and salutation to his final messenger or all messengers before, Abraham, the house of Abraham, and all other messengers. Back to Revelation seems to be a trivial issue. Everyone agrees on that in principle, because the Quran says clearly, اتبعوا ما أنزل إليكم من ربكم, follow what has revealed to you from your Lord, nothing else. Because what has been revealed from your Lord, assuming there's a revelation, we assume that we are not discussing the existence of God, nor that this is a revelation. We assume this is given. We have series discussing evidences for God, also the issues of revelation. So we assume this is a starting point. So wherever we say, we assume that this Quran is a final revelation, which has been proven now beyond doubt with certitude with the recent carbon dating of Quran manuscripts and so on, that this is the Quran which has been given by Muhammad. Now, is it from Muhammad himself or from metaphysical source? That has to be established on evidence, but we assume that have been established. That's our starting point. So we are addressing believers and even non-believers, non-Muslims, our Christian and Jewish friends, and otherwise even atheist friends. Make this assumption, let's see how consistent it can be developed further. But this triviality is trivial. It should be, if that's so, if there's a revelation, then obviously coming from the ultimate reason, for the ultimate being, from the necessary existing being, it must be the absolute truth. There's no other way rationally to conceive that what comes from God could have contradiction or mistakes by necessity of reason. Otherwise, reason will collapse and disappear, because the human reason is created by God. And if this is a faulty apparatus, then nothing can be concluded and everything is in vain. So it must be a valid apparatus of consideration, and this goes back to the one who created it as such. So it can't be the one who created that apparatus as a valid tool of consideration and evaluation himself be prone to mistakes and errors. That's out of question. But the reality of history, now we come to history, human beings with all their failings and all their emotions, all desires, all contradictions, all inherited misconceptions, biases, tribalism, nationalism, etc., etc. Sure. We find that the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we assume that he is really a messenger and he received this revelation, that this is the time of revelation. And he is the one infallibly explaining how to apply and understand this revelation. Because the Quran says clearly, Quran is phrased and formulated in an eloquent, extremely eloquent language, but concise language. In many places admit various interpretations. And is addressing events in space and time here on earth with human beings who eat and drink and go to the bathroom, who become sick, who die. Is not addressing people on the moon or entities elsewhere. So it has to be understood that addressing this reality, not words floating in an abstract space. They are in a reality. And there's a messenger who has, by evidence of the Quran itself, if the Quran is from Allah, then this evidence is irrefutable and absolute, that he's infallible in his actions, in his explanations, etc. That's the time of revelation.
So to summarize then, we're saying that we are assuming that obviously God exists and that he has sent a revelation which is infallible to his messenger.
Muhammad, the one in Mecca, the one known historically, who knows skeleton of his life, with certitude agreed upon by everyone in the world. So after that, history developed. The messenger is gone. He died, and the Quran announced his death well before his death long ago. and all humans will die ultimately, and then human beings took over the charge of this community and the state over the understanding and applying the religion, because they are addressed with that. And there were various interpretations, obviously, because, as we said, not everything is unique and not everything is established with certitude. Quite a number of things are established with certitude without any doubt, but in human interaction, they will have all these issues going forward with the issues of various interpretations. In the time of Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman to a great part, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, we can assume that although there's some mistakes made by those great four khulafa themselves as persons, as human beings, and even some interpretation of Sharia and some even issues of ijtihad. And we have evidences for that. We don't need to address. It may be shocking for many Muslims who have been trained to think that these four khulafa is somehow infallible. That's not true.
Yes.
That's definitely not true. With certitude, we have evidence for irrefutable evidences for that, and the scholars know that. But this with the spread opinion. Then, in the Fitna Kubra, when Uthman was assassinated, because of certain issues and complex issues which have been, unfortunately, until now, not treated historically the way it should be, I will address that maybe slightly a bit down the road.
Okay.
And I'm studying that now for 30 years without really coming to a completely satisfactory solution of the problem. It suffices to say that the two extreme points. One extreme point, which is taken by some Shia faction, not all Shia, some Shia faction, that there was a great conspiracy to deprive Ali from his imamah. That's one point of view. Some of it going to the extreme, even to claim that even some of the Quran has been hidden, which is clearly contradicting history and contradicting Islam.
Sure.
That's an extreme point of view. Conspiracy theory at its extreme.
Okay.
It's an old one. It's not only modern times we have conspiracy theory and CIA and MI6 involved. And then we have the other one, extreme Sunni position, is that almost making the Sahaba, especially when they say the Sahaba, for people who claim to be Salafi or Ahl Hadith, they mean actually Muawiyah. Don't be fooled by the word Sahaba, because you may attack some Sahaba quite severely, like you may attack Zubair and Talha when they fought against Ali in the Battle of the Camel, and you criticize them very badly, relatively badly. You should not swear and so on, and it will pass without. But the moment you start coming to Muawiyah, a certain sensitivity and goosebumps happen, because he was a head of state, and head of states have, in human societies, some kind of a glorification and a stand which try to exonerate them from whatever misdeed they have done. So we have that the Sahaba have become like something like holy cows. And this is another extreme. The general Sunni position, unfortunately, is closer to that gullible extreme. And
regarding the Sahaba as infallible.
And regarding Muawiyah specifically, as a model, as a Sahabi, as respectable, what he's done is good, and it's only an ijtihad. He did the best ijtihad, the best point of view. He thought the best for the ummah, which is not true. We have already now accumulated evidence over 30 years, and it has been covered away from the public people. But we are not going to discuss
Muawiyah questions on that, and perhaps we can answer that
later. It's not our main issue. But it's very important to clean Islamic history that the deviation from the revelation and the reinterpretation and playing, let us say, politics with the revealed text and going around it started with the time of Muawiyah. So the time of ta'wil, of reinterpretation according to their desire, according to enforcing power, according to justify your own deeds, started actually with Muawiyah. In that regard, a modern scholar of repute, that's Dr. Hakim al-Mutairi, the founder and leader of the Ummah gathering in Kuwait and the Arab Peninsula, which is like a new established party, he says also that there have been reinterpretation of revelation. It's called the time of ta'wil, reinterpretation, not the genuine one, but reinterpretation, which does not contradict the revelation outright directly, so it is an abrogation or the neglect of the revelation, or just casting it away like what has happened in modern times with secular states, but it can be still tolerated as somehow Islamic, somehow possible point of view. His point of view is that the reinterpretation time has started genuinely after the death of Abdullah ibn Zubayr in the year 73 Hijrah. I say no. It actually started with the time of Muawiyah, the year 40. That's the difference between me and Hakim al-Mutairi. And then it carried on for centuries, time of ta'wil, modifying Sharia according, reinterpreting it, mostly for the purposes of the governor and the ruler, of the powers to be, which is human nature. If you look at every society in the world, look, for example.
But that's quite an accusation, is it not, against many of the scholars who were around
Oh
at
yeah,
the time.
oh yeah, it's an accusation. I'll give you an example that it's accusation of many of the scholars who are of repute that they were gullible enough, but there were some of them who are definitely traitors in that time. To give you an example which will shock you, when Umar bin Abdul Aziz, this is the Khalifa who tried to go back to the methodology of the Khulafa al-Rashidun, of the rightly guided Khulafa, came to power. He stayed only 2.5 years and was able to correct many of the mistakes and the many injustices of Bani Umayyah, and then he died too early, most likely poisoned by his own family, because he was a danger for the power position and the wealth. After him, Yazid ibn Abdul Malik came, his cousin. Yazid ibn Abdul Malik at the beginning wanted to follow the footsteps of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. He was genuinely feeling that he's obliged to follow these footsteps and continue with re-establishing Khilafah Rashida.
Okay.
But he didn't have the willpower and the strength and the devotion and the piety, the internal composure to do that. And Bani Umayyah raised for him several scholars, mostly from Sham, Levant, this time where ISIS is now roaming.
Okay.
There is 50 scholars. The reason for 50 I mentioned later, 50 is like a significant number of making an oath with 50 people. Seems to be that absolutely statute. These scholars, Shami scholars, came to Yazid bin Abdul Malik and said, you don't need to follow the footsteps of Umar bin Aziz. Your time is not the same time. The time is bad. And in any way, the Khalifa, the head of state, is excused from all sins. He's guaranteed paradise anyway because he's the Khalifa. And they made an oath on that. 50 scholars, so-called scholars, made an oath on such an outrageous statement, which is genuinely a statement of kufr.
Yes.
Genuinely a statement which undermines Islam from its root. It's like putting a bomb on the Islam and destroying it.
Sure.
And they accepted that and then got indulged in whatever. Rulers indulged and the injustices came back, etc.
Okay.
That's Yazid bin Abdul Malik. And that's in the year 304 Hijri. There was still there was still two Sahabis still alive. One from the Bedouins, Al-Hirmas, and one in Mecca. I will remember his name now. Two Sahabis. So the Sahaba did not were extinct yet. We're still in the generation of the end of the generation of Sahaba. Not even 100 years after the death of the Prophet, we have such an outrageous. So this is a big accusation against scholars. Indeed.
So Sheikh, how do you reconcile your view and your criticism that you've just leveled there versus the hadith of Prophet, the best generation is mine and the one that follows and the one that follows
what I have. That hadith is definitely related from various Sahaba, and you find it in the major books. You find it in Bukhari and Muslim. I'm not attacking I don't attack the authenticity of that hadith, but there are other hadith which you don't hear. You may not have heard one of them. One of them says, for example, the following. Let me read it to you in its wording. One says, my ummah is like the rain. You don't know which is more blessed, the early part of it or the later part. And that has been, for example, a good man, a pious man like Imam Nawawi saying it's daif because he looked on only one narration in Tirmidhi from one channel of narration. It's narrated from Anas ibn Malik. Actually, the hadith of Anas ibn Malik is authentic and strong and has 4 or 5 channels of narration. Then the hadith is narrated with the authentic channel with the exact same wording from Ammar ibn Yasir. And the hadith is narrated with the authentic channel with the exact same wording from Imran ibn Hussein. And there are other narrations that are not the same level of authenticity in the channel, in the study of the channel, with the same wording from 3 other Sahaba. So this is also mutawatir. But also we have another hadith say, the best of my ummah is the beginning at the end, and in between it is muddy, it is like smoggy. You know, when the atmosphere is full of smoke, it's called smoggy, or the water full of mud is called muddy. Even Ibn Qayyim, who is regarded as a Salafi authority, regarded it as a fundamentally well established, that he included in his famous Nuniyya poetry about Aqidah. That the middle of the ummah is full of qadar, full of mud, full of smoke, while the beginning is pure as humanly possible, and the later. And there's an interesting hadith, let me read to it, that as Abdurrahman ibn Samurah came back as a messenger from Khalid bin Walid after the Battle of Mu'tah. In the Battle of Mu'tah, we know that Ja'far ibn Abi Talib was murdered first, that Zayd ibn Haritha was murdered first, then the banner was taken by Ja'far. Ja'far was killed, and his arms were cut. We know the story, every Muslim knows the story. And then after that, Abdullah ibn Rawaha took the banner, was killed, and then Khalid bin Walid, being a master military technicians, was able to retreat with the army safely and escape with the majority of them alive. And they met a huge Roman army at the time, but he was able to escape unscathed, relatively unscathed. Militarily, tactically, it's a defeat, but strategically, it was a great win.
Okay.
Because they were about 3,000, and the Roman army, the narration differed between 80,000, 100,000, 200,000, let's say even 60,000. If 3,000 can cause 60,000 such a harm that they are terrified, and they keep this bad memory for later, and they get defeated once and again during the conquest of the Levant, then you could understand that's a really strategic gain. But it is tactically a defeat. So he said, Abdullah ibn Samar, the messenger of Allah, with the news, what has happened. And the Rasul said, hold on. The banner was held by Zayd ibn Haritha, and he was martyred. And the banner was held after that by Jafar, he was martyred. The Prophet telling him, he knew that, and he announced to the people before even the messenger came. And the banner was held by Abdullah ibn Rawaha. Then this another narration, the famous one, you know, that he had announced that on the pulpit and he was weeping, alayhi salatu wasalam. This one is after that, after the messenger came, say, hold on, don't say anything, I will tell you what you are going to say. So this is a sign of prophecy, but you could attack the hadith if you wish. But anyway, then the people around him started all weeping and crying. He said, why are we weeping and crying? They said, why shouldn't we, if our best, like Zayd ibn Haritha, like Ja'far, like Abdullah ibn Rawaha, are the best of the Sahaba, are gone. So what's the sense of remaining alive? Life does not have any taste anymore, any meaning. He said, don't weep. The example of my ummah is like a man who has a garden, a plantation. He fixed that garden, planted it nicely, made it in perfect shape, dug the channels in it. He's describing how the gardener will do the job properly. And then the first year, when it came to bring its first fruit, he made a harvest. And the second year and third year. And you may find very often that the later years bring better harvest than the first year. Better and sweeter.
So
and we know that.
So it's indication of the quality of people.
Later. But there's a gap in between according to the other hadith. And then, so, وَالَّذِي بَعَثَنِي بِالْحَقِّ, with the one who has sent me with the truth. I make an oath by Allah, the one who sent me with the truth. The son of Maryam will find in my ummah a better replacement from his companions, from his disciples, better than his disciples.
What's the reference for these hadith that you're quoting?
Various places. I will have it. I have it in writing, inshallah. We'll post it with all isnad discussion, because some of them need very lengthy and horrifying isnad discussion. That's the digging out of the layers of history which have been hidden. So that you'll find in secondary books, and you have to dig them out and work. In the major books, it has been avoided. It's almost like a silent conspiracy and that conspiracy is inspired by the rulers. Why the rulers do inspire that? Because tell the people the times are bad, things are declining. So don't demand me to be like Omar. That's the trick. Example for that, even some of the Sahaba being not necessarily the greatest faqih and understandable, is the famous hadith in Bukhari. You may have heard the hadith, and it's always invoked. The hadith is that Zubair ibn Adi said, we went to Anas ibn Malik in the time of Hajjaj. Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, the tyrant, the bloodthirsty tyrant, who killed proven 60, 70,000 and imprisoned hundreds of thousands who were released after his death. May Allah have his whatever judgment on him. So we complained to him what we've suffered from Al-Hajjaj. That's in Bukhari. With authentic isnad, no doubt. So isbiru. Anas ibn Malik, not being the faqih and the man who have the deep insight, isbiru. No time will come to you except it will be worse than the previous time until you meet your Lord. I heard it from the Messenger of Allah. So here the Messenger say to Anas ibn Malik and some Sahaba, obviously he is not saying to in the desert, standing on it. It's addressing the Sahaba. I'm just stressing that to see what the proper interpretation of the hadith, that your time after this peak time with me, and possibly after him a short time, it will be declining steadily. Right. It will be worse. In the average, there will be maybe years better than the previous. That can be. But in the general, it's a general declining. You know how market decline, they go up and down, but the general trend is down until you meet your Lord. And this has been majorly used by government scholars and by governments, that times are bad. Today is worse than yesterday. And yesterday is worse than the day before. And we are much worse than the time of Omar. So don't open your mouth and ask the same like what Omar was doing, because the time is not suitable for that. You are not to that level. You are not befitting. You don't deserve a ruler like Omar and Abu Bakr. You don't deserve that. That's the trick. That's the political aspect of it. The hadith scholars and most of scholars are gullible. Even Anas ibn Malik is quite gullible. He did not understand the hadith. Now, there were various interpretations in Islamic history for interpretation. One of them is that this is really addressing, taking the other evidences at the same time. It's addressing the Sahaba only. The time of the Sahaba with the Prophet is definitely a peak. You cannot reach that peak after his death. It will be declining in piety, in devotion. There's no way. Missing such a leading person like the Prophet will have an effect. It will go down. Although, in matter of conquest and enlargement of the Islamic State at the time of Umar was bigger, but in general, the general ummah in its devotion, piety, and its purity is not the same level at the time of the Prophet. Sure. And that's what developed to the fitna al-kubra, the desire for wealth, for power, for competition, etc. started creeping in, and that's what the Prophet also once said. Say, I don't fear for you the Dajjal. I don't fear for you shirk or kufr. What I fear is that dunya will open widely for you, and then you will compete on dunya until it destroys you by competition, by killing each other, by fighting each other for dunya, for power, for wealth, for money. So from that. Yeah. We see that that this is really classified hadith al Qurun Qarni. It must be understood in if it's authentic. Most likely, we can continue to say because it's tawatur, it's authentic. It has to be assumed that the best generation of Bani Adam until now, until my time and around it, is my generation. This is the best generation from Bani Adam. So it was going uphill for the humanity in general, in matter of piety, as generation by generation, at the time of the Prophet. That's the meaning of it. It does not mean that there will be later nobody who's comparable to that generation. It is only for the time past and now, not for the far future. Evidences by the hadith of the matar, the rain. Yeah. Evidences by the hadith of the Isa al-Maryam finding people who are a better replacement than his own disciples. Evidence by the hadith, the best of my ummah is the beginning and the end, and in between is muddying or smoky. And the hadith of Hudayfa about fitan. So we have to take all evidence. That's one of the problem, which when we say back to revelation, is that it seems to be, I give you a hadith, and this is even mutawatir. So it's back to revelation. No, that's not. This is back to one hadith. The revelation is not only this one hadith, and not only this one ayah. Yes. That will be catastrophic to rely on one ayah on hadith. The reason for that is that certain issues, in matter of Aqidah, mostly the issues of Qadr, they are so complex that you need to take various evidences because it has a multifaceted problem. In the case of society and ruling and government, you have to take also many evidences on board to see the general picture. If you don't take it in matter of war and peace and relation to other nations, which we will address later in more detail, which is our main topic, you will have to address and take evidences from Sirah, from history, from Quran, and take them together. Without taking them together, you will go astray.
So your view is then, just to contextualize it against our first question, back to revelation is required because there was a lack of that happening, or there was a the scholars they were diluted in how they were approaching their views on or their analysis of revelation beforehand.
And that started in the time Sahaba, some Sahabi who are not that scholarly covered, and after that it increased slowly until it became the general tendency.
And then according to the hadith, the fact is that during the middle part of the Islamic nation, there will be a decline, essentially.
It will be good, there will be belief, there will be some good, there will be charities, there will be achievements, no doubt about that. They have plenty of achievement up to the time of the Abbasi. We have massive achievement in human development, in science, in technology, and also scholarly, but it is muddied
But your intention here is essentially to have a more of a comprehensive look.
Look.
In your view, more comprehensive that has been done.
In the hope that we can remove some of these or put the condition that the mud and the smoke can be removed. Yep. I don't think we'll be able to remove it, all of it, but at second generation and so on, so that when Isa comes, he will find better people than a replacement for his disciple. Because he will not come in a vacuum. He will come to people who are capable. Who will be able to establish a peaceful world situation which has never seen in human history before, and end all wars, the real end of wars then, not that what the United Nations claims and Mr. Obama, the war to end all wars, only this nonsense. These people are not capable.
Well, I'm sure we'll cover
that. Qualified to do
I'm
that.
sure we'll cover that in some of the questions that we have to ask. Well, the first in our series of topics is the Wahhabi ideology, its origin, historical development, linked to the Al Saud and modern-day manifestations. This topic, in order to be covered fully, will be split into a series of videos. And to be clear, the objective is not to placate, justify, or strengthen any particular anti-Wahhabi movement or thought process. The reason this is being done is to help contextualize the massive bloodshed that we have all been witnessing in Iraq and Syria in recent times. Of course, we're speaking of the group calling itself ISIS, but there have been others in recent times, such as the GIA in Algeria or the Pakistani Taliban. The aim, therefore, is to understand in a comprehensive way the beliefs that leads to these views and to rebut these views from their origin in order to protect our future generations from misguidance. Enlightening us with his knowledge on the subject with decades of research work into this, amongst many other areas, is a man who needs no further introduction, Sheikh Professor Muhammad Al-Masri. And as part of this discussion, we will be examining the history and the characteristics of the Khwarich. We will also ask the Sheikh to give his analysis of the intellectual roots of this. We will ask the Sheikh to give his analysis of the intellectual roots of this movement by critiquing some of the opinions of two great Imams in particular, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal as leader of Ahl Hadith scholarship, and Imam Ahmad. Go back a bit, right? More to the beginning of the thing, right? We will ask the Sheikh to give his analysis of the intellectual roots of this movement by critiquing some of the opinions of two great Imams in particular. Firstly, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal as leader of Ahl Hadith scholarship, and Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. Specifically, we'll be looking at the ramifications of some of the views of these two great Islamic personalities. We will ask the Sheikh to give a brief history of the Wahhabi movement and specifically comment on the events surrounding the collapse of the Uthmani Khilafah or Ottoman Caliphate and the ensuing relationship between the Wahhabi scholars and Saud. We will then look to examine the above discussions in light of current events, with the apparent spread of takfir and the movement of focusing the Muslims in becoming embroiled in Islamic discussions of a far lower priority. Finally, we'll ask the Sheikh to give his views on the way forward, both at the individual level and a collective ummah level. Although we're not broadcasting live here, there is an email address given below to which you, the viewer, are invited to email us your thoughts, opinions and views, and we will endeavour to answer them as best as we can. Without further delay then, Sheikh, please give us the history and characteristics of the Khwarich.
Yeah. Well, this is a huge project, actually. It's let's start with the Khawarij, then we go the issue of bloodshed, etc. The issue of Khawarij has been, it goes back actually to a movement against Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib when the Fitna Kubra happened, when Uthman was assassinated by a certain plot of certain people, which we'll address maybe in one of our publication. After these 30 years of studies, we have found out really the hints where it is, where's the problem. The real problem, not the fake problem, which people claim that there was a man called Abdullah ibn Saba and he's of Jewish origin and he's black and all this. This is an imaginary figure. It never existed. This has been now proven, well established beyond doubt. Has been proven by Orientalists, has been proven by Shia. Now even Sunni scholars have come to that conclusion if they heard it, studied it honestly. There's a big conspiracy there which had to be clarified. During a battle of Siffin, a trick perpetuated by Muawiyah's people, Amr ibn As specifically is the one assumed who once suggested the trick, is that to lift the mushafs on the tops of spears, saying we ask to refer back to the Book of Allah, and the fight should stop until we have like an arbitration. Tahkim. Ali said, this is a trick. These people never referred to the Book of Allah before. They are not referring now. If they referred to the Book of Allah, they would have come to the Imam, the head of the state, the one who got the bay'ah, the legitimate bay'ah in Medina, and they would have sat in a court of law and say, this one is accused, this one is accused, this one is participating in the killing of Uthman, and we got the witnesses, and we have witnesses, and we can do a proper court proceeding, a proper process. Some faction in Ali camp, simple-minded, who their understanding of Sharia is simple-minded. This will exist in every community. There are simple-minded understanding of democracy, simple-minded understanding of communism, simple understanding of Christianity, everywhere, in every religion, every ideology. They said, no, people are calling us to the Book of Allah. We have to accept. The arbitration happened. It was messed up again. We have to study exactly what has happened there. There are various narrations, everyone accusing the other one, messing it up. Anyway, after that, some of the people of the camp of Ali say, how could you accept to nominate men to judge about the book of Allah? This is kufr. Because Allah said, whoever rules with does not rule with Allah has revealed is kafirun. And you made tahkeem of men in the book of Allah. That's not acceptable. That's kufr. That's the beginning of the Khwarich. That's again a misunderstanding of the meaning of ruling and so on. So this is the beginning. And then there was a discussion with them ongoing. Abdullah ibn Abbas visited them. Ali had a long argument with them. Many of them came back. He could persuade them by argument, by evidences, not by the sword, not by force. And even those who stood aside decided not to fight with him and not to fight Muawiyah. He told, as long as you are not fighting us, as long as you are with us in the battle against the foreign outside kuffar, if there's any battle, there was no battle at that time. There was only the internal warfare between Muslims, the internal, what they call it, civil war. As long as you don't pull a sword, we will not prevent you from coming to the masjid to pray with us, and we will not regard you as an enemy. But a faction of them decided to go to war against Ali ibn Abi Talib, and he fought them. And during that fight, he exposed many hadith he heard from Messenger of Allah, specifying certain persons, certain description, which obviously an evidence for his prophethood. That's for Ali ibn Abi Talib. Now, what the hadith? It's only Ali ibn Abi Talib narrating hadith of Khwarich. If someone says this man is biased, he is himself fighting for ruling. Maybe, we don't know from far away from history. This man is fighting against Muawiyah. Maybe he is just wanting to establish his power and his ruling by lying. It cannot be excluded rationally.
Okay.
Fine. But the hadith of Khwarij are narrated by many, including the one against Ali ibn Abi Talib. So it's again tawatur. The hadith of Khwarij actually shows that what is the disease which made someone become a Khariji. The most interesting one of them, again, unfortunately, because of especially the so-called scholarly Salafiyya Almiya, did not study the job properly. And in time past also, that a strange story came through various channels of narrations, each corroborating each other in its skeleton, with small variations here and there, as you expect from narration, from various witnesses. And it contained the following interesting story. It may be interesting really to read the summary of the story without going now in the fine points of isnad and so on. Leave that for the publication. What is the summary is the following, is that Anas is narrating, he's the main narrator, Anas is narrating, and the other Sahaba are narrating also, part of it, but the main story. And the narrator says, we were discussing a man who was extreme in his piety, in his jihad, in his external piety, in prayers and so on. They were gathered around the Prophet, maybe in a halaqah. Yeah? And they said, we mentioned this man, how much he prays, how he's in the battlefield, how courageous he is, etc. And the Prophet said, I don't know him. And they describe him further, he looks like that. I said, I don't know him. Let me stop here and comment. If the Prophet said, I don't know him, what does this mean? This means this man does not come to the halaqah. He's not interested in knowledge.
Sure.
He's a man of action, but not of mind and thought and ilm. Otherwise, if he would have attending in the halaqah, the Prophet would have known from the description. Then said, when we are saying that, now this is, I call that in my writing, a divine comedy, a divine drama, displayed in real time in history. The man came.
This is the man who...
This one.
Who didn't...
They were describing. This is all set by Allah as a real piece of theater, tamthiliya, as really a movie in front, real movie. And they say, this is the man we are talking. I say, is this the one you're talking about? Being so pious, so much prayer and so much jihad? I see a strike of the devil in his face. So the man came and said, Salaam alaikum. He greeted the people with Salam. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. And he wanted to continue to the masjid. He did not want to sit the halaqah. The Prophet asked, Anshuruk Allah, I ask you by Allah, when you came here, did you feel in your heart that you are better than everyone present here? He did not mention including the Prophet, but obviously the Prophet is to be excluded. Is that better than anyone here? He said, Allahumma na'am. Yes, wallahi al-azim. Yes, true. I felt I am better than everyone. he's self-righteous. So he proceeded to the masjid, and one narration say he made like a small area around him by his foot. You see the arrogant behavior. With his foot, he's designing like a sijada, like a prayer corner, just with his foot, and started praying. Now, what made many people be amazed about that hadith is that what happens after. The Prophet said, who all of you will go and kill this man? Shocking. But I said, this is a divine comedy. Abu Bakr said, I will. And he had his sword with him. They have the sword with them all the time. At least a long knife, which is like a short sword, not the battle one, the battlefield one. So he went there, found the man praying, indulged in the prayer. He said, yesterday, a few days ago, the Messenger said, I am prohibited from killing the Musallin. This is Musalli. Let me go and consult the Prophet. This man is praying. He's not sitting in the masjid or contaminating the masjid or disrespecting the masjid. He's obviously praying. So he went back. The Prophet said, sit. You will not be able to kill him. Omar, go and do that. Omar is hearing this conversation. So he went, Omar found him in sujood. Say this even worse. The man is in sujood. Sujood has a higher ranking. The core of salah is sujood. It's prostration, where you put your head down for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Abu Bakr did not do the killing. Abu Bakr is a good example. Let me, for example, I'll clarify the Prophet that the man is still praying and seemed to be devoted, and he's a very long sujood. So he went back. Prophet said, you are not the man for him. And he told Ali, get up and get him if you find him. So I will kill him. Say, if you find him, we will kill him. If you find him. Ali went, the man was gone. He finished salah and went. Now, we don't know, did Allah inspire his messenger that I will do this divine comedy in front of everyone from the beginning, and he knew when he gave the command it will not be executed by the sign of Allah, because Allah is in control of the universe completely, and the minds and the feelings. Some people did not like the hadith because it shows that Abu Bakr is weak. It's not like, this has nothing to do with weakness. Abu Bakr has a good consideration. The man is praying.
Yes.
But there's no reason to shed his blood. So he has to clarify the Prophet.
Sure.
Now someone said Umar even failed. Umar also said Abu Bakr is a good example, and the man is in deep sujood. How can I kill someone who is in sujood? So the hesitation of someone who respects blood, respect Islam, respect prayer. Ali is a man of Saud, and he will execute. And that's what his nature. But the Prophet said, if you find him, he didn't find him, the man is gone. The Prophet said, if you have killed him, this would have been the first and the last of the Khwarich of my ummah. Similar to this one, there will be people, now the Hadith Khwarij all mention this feature. People who read the Quran, but doesn't go through their throat. لا يتجاوز تراقيهم. In earlier years, like 20, 30 years ago, and also most scholar, I was having difficulty understanding this hadith. What means go through their throat? Because many interpreted that it doesn't go in their heart. So they are not believer, they are munafiq. But this man is fully devoted. This man is in the battlefield. It can't be. There's no need for him for munafiq to be praying that long and going in the battlefield. It's enough to pretend to be a Muslim and avoid the battlefield and escape with his own skin. That's what a munafiq who doesn't believe really. So what does it mean that the Quran doesn't go into down from their throat? I came to understand that by understanding both from the Quran, the Arab tradition, is that the Arabs have the conception that the knowledge and the information is in the chest. And that's the meaning of the ayah, شَرَحْنَا لَكَ صَدْرَكَ. We opened your chest, meaning we widen it so it can accommodate for considerable amount of knowledge. And the place of iman and belief and commitment is the heart. So the metaphorical heart, not this pump, no. The metaphorical heart is the seat of consciousness and of will, and essentiality of rational thought, the process of thinking. But the information, the knowledge, is in the chest. This is the Arab, and that's the metaphorical expression which is used in the Quran. That's the reason some people try to explain the hadith by the famous story that the Prophet got his belly slit and his heart cleaned. Independent of if it's true or not true, this is not the Sharh al-Sadr. Sharh al-Sadr, we opened your chest so you have considerable knowledge. Your chest is wider than it used to be by our divine action, so you became knowledgeable. Originally, he was not. He's ignorant. He's illiterate. But by this act, divine act, he became knowledgeable. So it doesn't go through the throat, meaning it is not digested. It's not becoming useful knowledge. It's data, but not information, not real knowledge. It's data, just bits of data. That's the one characteristic. And from this characteristic related to it, because they read the Quran and they do, and the other hadith which are also mutawatir say, addressing the Sahaba, يحقر أحدكم صلاته مع صلاتهم وصيامه مع صيامهم. You will disrespect your salah compared to their salah. Your siyam compared to their salah. They pray so extensively and so long that I'm not doing anything.
No comparison.
No comparison. Even your siyam, you may be doing siyam maybe Monday and Thursday like many Muslims do, but these guys are almost continuously in siyam. So you say, what's my siyam? It's worthless. And the Prophet says, immediately after that, يمرقون من الدين كما يمرق السهم. They exit the deen like an arrow exiting the bow. So this is not. And in another hadith of Anas ibn Malik, which came only one channel of narration, but it's corroborated by the Quran, which is higher than corroborated by others. That's how you say, يعجبون الناس وتعجبهم أنفسهم. They want to be pleased by the people and they are pleased with themselves. They are doing tazkiyat al-nafs. Tazkiyat al-nafs is a deadly disease. Feeling of righteousness, that you are righteous and the other are not, is an unbelievable disease, which was very widespread in the Jews, and the Quran rebuked them for it. Said, don't you see those who يزكون أنفسهم, purify, declare themselves to be righteous? Allah purify whatever He wants. Only Allah can judge who is really righteous. And they will not be judged. There will be no injustice committed against them. ولا يظلمون فتيلا. Whatever they do, it will be counted for them. But self-purification is not acceptable. Don't. And another ayah say, ولا تزكوا أنفسكم. He knows you better when He created you from mud. You are from mud. You have all the shortcomings of mud. You have all the desires of mud, all the animal desires you have. So don't praise yourself. Allah knows very well what you are or what you are not. So don't try to purify yourself and declare yourself. So this is the disease. They read the Quran shallow, without digesting, without deep understanding. Not like the real Sahaba who were attending his halaqas. This one was not attending the halaqah. This example one, this is a divine drama. The other hadith relate to not only to this man. This one was commented similarly, but other one. The famous one is the Khwarich al-Tamimi. And another one it happened twice, similar situation, in the Ghazwa of after the conquest of Mecca. They went to fight Hawazin in Hunayn. And after the Hunayn, the tribes were defeated. First, the Muslims ran away when they were happy with their numbers. They were proud. We are having numbers. We can't be defeated because of numbers. And they ran away because they didn't help them. So the number does not help. What helps is really firmness, willingness to fight, willingness to stand. It's not numbers. After that, the Prophet was distributing the camels and so on. And the man of Quraysh, this is not the same story, because some people confuse, think it's the same story. It's not the same story like the story of the Khwaisara. A man from Quraysh, Allah knows who is he. My guess is maybe Abu Sufyan. But a man of Quraysh said, this distribution is not a distribution which Allah likes. Because he gives some tribal chieftain of Najd considerable amount of money, like 100 camels, 50 camels, 100 camels. These tribal chieftains are dangerous leaders who need to be not to be softened, need to be attracted by money, need to be controlled by money. And this is for the head of state to know where to put the money, where to spend money, to ease the hostility of certain people. But this one from Quraysh, because he did not get the share, and he regarded himself more important maybe, or he should be pacified, but there's no need to pacify Quraysh. Quraysh is defeated. Makkah is in the complete control of Islam. But these tribes in Najd are dangerous, and they proved their danger in the wars of Ridda after the Prophet passed away. So they have to keep the peace. They have to be bribed, so to say, with money. So he said, هذه قسمه لي بوجه الله. So I said, you don't trust me in distribution, and the one in heaven trusts me with his revelation. So that's this one. And he said, from this source of this mentality, people will come out which you will be disrespect your salah. That was in Hunayn. But later on, in the last year, before his death, few months before his death, salam, actually in Ramadan, he sent Khalid ibn Walid and Ali ibn Abi Talib toward Yemen. Yemen means anything south of Mecca, 100 kilometers, is called Yemen. And in that trip, Ali ibn Abi Talib converted all Hamadan. That's the tribe which is called now Dawasid. That's our tribe. I'm proud of that, obviously. But it's our tribe, Hamadan. He converted them to Islam. And his instruction is very interesting. In the Maghazi Waqidi, he says, when you meet the people of Hamadan or your enemy, then call them for Islam. Don't hurry in fighting them. And then wait. If they don't accept to attack you, and kill one of your men, then wait. Don't still. Call them again. wait for them. Maybe they will come. And then when they attack you once more and kill a second one, still wait and call them for Islam. Then if there's no help after those 2 killings, then you fight them. We send that message to Daesh. This is in Maghazi al-Waqidi. I have also the reference and so on. I can bring it.
You have the references for these
I have for all of these and with the places and the text.
We'll put them up, inshallah.
We'll put them up. So,
sorry, Sheikh, I've got to interrupt. You said you sent these references to Daesh.
No, I said I'm sending that now.
You're sending them,
That. They have it, but they don't want. They read the Quran without digesting it. If they read the Quran digesting, how they will be doing with the hadith, it will be less digestible.
Okay. I'm sure we'll cover it in more detail later.
It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But we're still sending it to them. In that campaign, Ali, that was after Ramadan in the 10th year, meaning before the death of Rasul, like 6 months. After Ramadan, Ali ibn Abi Talib sent some gold, which was mined but not even purified from its dust. So it's pieces of gold with dust, as a booty to the Messenger of Allah to distribute it. So he distributed between 4 chieftains from Najd only in Medina before going to the final pilgrimage, Hajjat al-Wada. And then a man with short dress, that's the description. Don't blame me, that's what they described him, with beard which is not organized, not nicely done, very much like the Salafi nowadays.
Okay.
And with a mark of prayer on his forehead, very much like so many Salafis and many Sufis. I'm not attacking only the Salafis and Sufis in that. Some of them even pretend to make a mark deliberately to show that they are having a lot of sujood and so on. And the man said, اعدل يا محمد فإنك لم تعدل. Be just, Muhammad, you are not just. This distribution is not the way Allah wants. And Allah said, ويحك, woe on you. Who will be just if Allah and His Messenger are not just? The one in heaven, again like that, the one in heaven trusts me, I don't trust me. So Umar stood up and said, let me strike his neck. This is the munafiq. I said, leave him. From this school or from this from this root or from this germ, means the back. Because the Arab had a conception that children are produced from the back. Yeah. They carry the feature. Somehow, this is an old conception which is reflected in the language. From ضئضئه, that's obviously metaphorical because they do not need to be his descendant genealogically, but they are descendant intellectually. Yeah. There will be people and the same description like the one in Hunayn. That's the same description of this old man who was not killed by Allah's design. So, and then the Prophet commented on all these cases. Say, لَإِنْ أَدْرَكْتُمْ, if I meet them at that time, what's meeting them at that time? One of them is here. They are here. So what meeting them at that time? When they come out, because he said يَقْتُلُونَ أَهْلِ الْإِسْلَامِ, they kill the Muslims and leave the pagans. This is a metaphorical statement, meaning they don't hesitate even killing Muslims and leave the pagans. If I meet them, I will exterminate them like the tribe of Ad, which was exterminated by the wind, by the storm, by the hurricane. Or, addressing the Sahaba, when you meet them, exterminate them, extinguish them, animuhum. It does not say kill them, say animuhum, make them sleep. Like extinguish them completely. That means when they come out with the sword, because the ideology is there, the man is there, he's standing there, he's not killed. So it is when they pull the sword. So these hadith, which are mutawatir, and I have a summary of them actually, not all of them, because I summarized only like from about 15 Sahaba, and Ibn Kathir and Al-Hafiz al-Hajj summarized from over 30 Sahaba. So this is one of the strongest and most mutawatir hadith you could imagine. From these hadith is clearly what we have the disease. We have misunderstanding of the Quran, not digesting it, understanding properly, not understanding the Quran is have muhkam and mutashabih. Not only that, it has also zahir and batin. And some people think this is the statement of the Sufi. It's not true. There's an authentic narration from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Say the Quran is having, every ayah of the Quran is having zahir and batin, all the way down to 7 batins, 7 deep of meanings, which not everyone can grasp. So if someone does not understand that the Quran has all this depth and all these hints going deeper and deeper and deeper, then you don't expect him to apply it to the reality properly. And And in addition to that, these people are indulged in acts of worship, in act maybe of piety, in act even of jihad, because they said, because this man who was supposed to be killed, theoretically, because he was never killed by Allah decided, because he did not do anything which was worthy of being killed. It's only his character is like that. This one was also famous in the battlefield. When he meet the enemy, nobody will do like he does to the enemy. And still, of all these great features or great virtues of action is not based on a proper understanding and proper meaning and proper intention. Because if you are really a true believer, understanding the meaning of the Quran, the gist of the Quran, then you understand your own shortcoming and you will never be self-righteous. The moment you are in self-righteousness, meaning you did not understand the Quran, did not understand the meaning of the Quran. You declare, even it came to my mind a few days ago that even the famous phrase in the New Testament, which is very troublesome for those who believe in the divinity of Isa, when a young man say, good teacher, tell me, so why do you call me good? Only God is good. And it's very troublesome for them because it obviously contradicts his divinity. But we are not discussing now with our Christian brothers. It's another time. Even Isa is humble enough to recognize that such attributes of tazkiyah can be only worthy of the divine necessarily existing being. No other being can claim these virtues and these attributes. No way. You have to recognize that, and that's the reason that many of the Sahaba, all of them, they were worried. Umar asking Hudayfa, did the Prophet mention me from the munafiqeen? And some of you, our brothers from the Shia say, Umar knows that he's himself a munafiq. No, he's worried. He knows he is never perfect. He knows he has shortcoming. He's self-critical. So this is the situation. But if you look now at the Wahhabi movement, now historically these Khwarich were having these characteristics. So Ali ibn Abi Talib killed, and he mentioned that a certain specific person with certain description will be under them, and they searched for him. And it's maybe interesting to mention the story when they met the Khwarich, and the Khwarich committed even mistakes in the battlefield. Instead of using the spears first and so on, like usual battle, they are Arabs, they know how to fight. They used the sword directly. And the army of Ali took them with the spears. The spears are long, so they killed them with the spears. You start with the spears first, and then when you close to the other side, enemy or otherwise, then you use the sword. So they were almost exterminated, except 10 men who survived. And Ali said, search for a man who, one with his hand he has a hand deformity. His hand is like the breast of a woman with few hairs on it. A dark-colored man, Luthadiyya. So they searched for him. So we didn't find this man. Say, لا ما كذبت ولا كذبت. I did not lie, nor the Messenger of Allah lied to me. Search for him again. Say, we searched, we didn't find. So Ali was very troubled. And she was so in his face. So he came himself and started searching everywhere. They found like a ditch in which bodies on top of each other. They took all the bodies out, and the lowest one was the Thadiyya. And Ali made takbir and made sujood and said, this the Messenger of Allah told me. And the various people standing there, Abid al-Salmani specifically, if I remember correctly, one of the followers, not a companion. But a man was alive in Jahiliyyah, but he never got the opportunity to go to Medina and meet the Prophet. So he's an older Jahili. He said, you hear that from the Messenger of Allah? Do you swear by Allah and that you hear this? He said, Wallahi al-Azim, 3 times that I heard from the Messenger of Allah with this description. And they told you before we found him. So this is one of the episodes on the side which corroborate that and could make the whole picture really self-corroborating. Now later on, because these declared takfir on anyone committing a major sin, this group of people. And the later generation of them was even worse. These at least were not killing women and children. They're called muhakkima, the people of Nahrawan. They were not killing women and children. They were killing only adult Muslims. But later on, the Azariqa, in the time of Al-Malik ibn Marwan, later on, there's not much later. That was in the year 38, something like that. And the Azariqa in 68, so 30 years later, same generation almost. You could have been very well with the muhakkima and join Nafi' ibn al-Azraq, that's called Azariqa. They have no hesitating killing women and children. Sufriya are similar to them, but less. They say children underage should not be killed, but women and men can be killed. So Sufriya avoid killing children, but both of them made the kafir on anyone doing kabira. So later scholars, when they discussed the chapters of the books of Aqidah, the Khwarich, they speak about the one who, they pick certain characteristic of the Khwarij. They don't go to the hadith, unfortunately. That's again, back to the vision. What they go to is that these Khawarij had the following characteristics. One is that they make takfir on kabira. Based on takfir, they kill. So for them, kufr is enough to shed blood, which is again mistake, misunderstanding the Quran. But this mistake is widespread, not only in Khawarij. Secondly, they have they curse Ali and Uthman. That's a character. Thirdly, they say the Imam or the Khalifa does not need necessarily to be from Quraysh, which is correct actually. That's the correct point of view. But unfortunately, that correct point of view has been buried under the historic rubble because it was adopted by the Khawarij.
Okay.
And we have a complete research about that, showing that this is the hadith that are either faulty or have been misunderstood. It's a khabar from the Prophet. It is not an injunction that the Khalifa has to be from Quraysh. There is no reason to believe that. So that they look for any group which have, and that's what, for example, the Wahhabi and ISIS usually do. We don't make takfir on kabira. We don't say the one who committing fornication or taking usury, not making istihlal, taking usury is a kafir. We don't say that. We don't say that. So we are not Khawarij. That's the usual argument. The Khawarij is according to Shahrastani, according to Ibn Hazm, according to have these 3 or 4 characteristics. Whoever have these 4 is a Khawarij. No. A Khawarij could be one of these Nahrawani or Ibn Nafi, but could be also applies for sometimes extreme groups of Shia. They're also Khawarij because they takfir on the others and kill them. An interesting story. One young man was telling his father, I was attending the khutbah of Hajjaj, and he said this and this. He said, my son, fear away, don't be close to that man. He's Azraqi, from the Azariqa. How can be he's Azraqi? The Azariqa is the enemies of Abdullah ibn Urwan, and Al-Hajjaj is fighting them also. Say, my son, the Azraqi is the one who declared to be a kafir and kill you. That's the Azraqi. The Azraqi is not the follower of Nafi' ibn Azraq. Azraqi is this direction. Son, if you disagree with him, he declared you to be a kafir and kill you. That's what makes you Azraq. It's not necessary that you are in the camp of, you may be the camp of the government even, like Hajjaj. Hajjaj is Azraqi. The same for some extreme Shia group who declare the other Muslim to be kafir. They are also Khawarij. And all of them has misunderstood the revelation and misapplied the revelation. And they're all self-righteous because the moment you will judge someone to be a kafir, and you declare that because of that you can shed his blood, you have declared yourself that you are pure enough and you can do that killing.
But that suggests that you should not do takfir at all.
No.
Are you saying that you should not do takfir at all?
No. You can't do takfir, but it's in the base of evidences from Quran Sunnah which are absolute certitude. That's not what.
But surely, whether they're Shia or whether they are Sunni,
they have no certitude. The evidence for that is that from their own camps, people are criticizing the evidence and show this faulty. From the camp of the Khawarij time of Ali ibn Abi Talib, many have come back and were convinced that their conclusion is wrong.
Right.
Because tahkim is possible. Why do we have human judges? They judge according to what they understand with the Book of Allah. That's not the ruling. The problem is that in the case of Khawarij, in the case of Ali ibn Abi Talib, they don't understand the meaning of ruling, because when Allah said, whoever does not rule with what Allah has revealed is kafirun. Now, what the word ruling means in Quran? You can scan the Quran, like taking, for example, the index of Ahmed Fuad Abdul Baqi, and work out all the ayahs with the word hukm and hakam. You will find ruling is essentially, in the original language, Arabic language, is judging something, attributing something to something else. I judge this rose to be beautiful or smelling nice. This is judgment. This is the ruling. I rule that this rose is nice looking. This is a aesthetic judgment, a judgment of beauty related to this rose. I judge this action to be haram. Based on what? On a certain evidences from the revelation. I judge this, so this is the judgment generally. Now, when the Quran says, those who rule do not rule with what Allah has revealed, kafirun, meaning human being will be able to rule. But what's the ruling of the human being? Which would they be ruling? What they will be ruling in is that they will be doing judiciary, arbitrating disputes. They will be giving fatwa. They will be managing the public affairs, in which you have to judge judgment, obviously. That's all ruling. So what is the ruling which is exclusive when they say, La hukma illa lillah? Ruling is only but to Allah. Like the ayah which says, In al hukmu illa lillah. Ruling is but. Which ruling is meant there? The Prophet does ruling by formulating the law in an infallible way. He's infallible in that. So what is the meaning? Meaning the essence of the law itself, the meaning of the law, that's only for Allah. It's not the Prophet who rules. He formulates according to what he has inspired. So that's what ruling is only for Allah, is the judgment, which meaning declaring things to be halal and haram in themselves by divine sovereignty, the sovereign right of the divine to judge things to be halal and haram. Do this or don't do that, without any further reasoning except by his own divine sovereignty. That's what only for Allah. But the prophets were ruling. The prophets of Bani Israel in the Surah Al-Ma'idah, the famous ayah, we have revealed the Torah, which contains light and guidance, with which the prophets rule. يحكم بها النبيون. The prophets are ruling by the Torah. This is not a ruling is but only for Allah. This is something else. That's the ruling with that what Allah has revealed. So this is the Quran. If you don't understand that from the ayahs, you don't understand between the meaning of ruling here, ruling and the judges rule. And Allah called the judges in dunya also حاكم. ولا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل وتدلوا بها إلى الحكام. You should not take each other wealth without justification, or go even to the judges to gain something with falsehood and with false evidences. So these are judges, they are hakim, but it's not a hukm, which is say in al-hukmu ila Allah in Surah Yusuf in 2 places.
So the distinction has been missed.
This is missed, and this is catastrophic. This is you could say it is like in computer science, it's a terminal disease, not even a fatal disease, terminal. It makes the program shut down, blue screen.
And Sheikh, who's made these misjudgments in this respect?
The Khwarich.
The Khwarich.
And others, and many others also. But it is scattered, bits and bits. If it accumulates in one group, connected with self-righteousness and pulling the sword, then they become Khwarich. Whatever the group is. Extreme Shia, extreme Salafi, whatever they declare themselves. So you have this. Nobody says, well, don't declare. You can't declare takfir. Actually, what should be declared is to declare a certain statement to be a statement of kufr. That a certain person is a kafir needs further verification. Is he aware about the evidences? Has been confronted with the evidences in a convincing way? Did the evidence being offered to him in such a way that he could not do otherwise except study them, understand them? Sometimes the evidence is not offered properly. So you can't ascertain the facts because you did not get the prerequisite information on the table. But the statement itself is a statement of kufr.
Yes.
But the one who is saying is not necessarily a kafir. So this is also a distinction which has to be made in a matter of takfir.
What, if any, are the links between the Khawarij movement in whatever form and the statements of or the understanding of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal and Imam Ibn Taymiyyah?
You cannot say that because Ahmad is definitely not from the early Khawarij, nor he's a Nafi'i Azraqi. Ahmad Hanbal went to the other extreme. Also, there's a misconception that Khawarij, they thought it is, and it's all used by current government for Saudi Arabia specifically, declaring anyone against the Saudi regime to be Khariji. But the Khawarij is not the one who rebelling against the ruler. The one that bring against the ruler in the old fiqh books, that's even in the fiqh, even in the ta'wil fiqh, in the deformed fiqh of later generation. Not the fiqh, it's called Baghi, transgressor. Whatever, and not necessarily even a baghi. It could be a justified rebellion if the ruler is unjust. So that's the reason the book of the fiqh, despite of all ta'wil over the generation, you find the book said when people rebel against the imam, then the imam has the obligation to discuss with them what is their grievance,
right,
and ascertain that the grievances have been removed. Then, when the grievances have been removed, obviously scholarly advice with the agreement of the rest of the ummah, that's the proper way of doing it. And they continue in the rebellion, then they are obviously eyeing for power without any justification. You should not have the power, and there's an imam in power. A just imam who addressed all your grievances. Then they are bughat. They are not Khawarij, because they don't necessarily declare the imam to be kafir. He is on power. He's not worthy of power. I am more worthy. That's not takfir. I'm fighting him for this reason, to remove him from power. If he goes away from power, that's fine. It's all what we need. Well, that's not what Khawarij do.
So are you saying there's no link then between
in that sense, no. But obviously these first generation are gone. Then the government, the rulers of Muslim domains established themselves by force, like Bani Umayyah and then Bani al-Abbas. Although Bani Abbas came with a popular revolution, but later they came as oppressive and tyrannical as Bani Umayyah, or slightly better, we must admit. There was nobody so tyrannical and bloody like Bani Umayyah, and so viciously playing on tribal contradiction, which is clear because Bani Umayyah is actually a counter-revolution. If Islam is a revolution against the status quo which was in the world, then obviously the Umayyad rule is a counter-revolution, which happened to any revolution. Once the revolution, there's a counter-revolution. Was the counter-revolution. But Abbas pretended, the leader of the Abbasi, pretended to be correcting the situation, but their slogan was faulty from the beginning. Their slogan was that they're calling to bring the right back to someone from Al-Bayt. That was the mistake, because the right is not for Al-Bayt or non-Al-Bayt. The right is for the Muslims. Bring back the Shura, should have been. And that's what the Sahaba was objecting to Muawiyah when he appointed Yazid. That go back to the Ummah. Go back to the Shura like Abu Bakr and Umar, for the whole Ummah. Al-Bayt or non-Al-Bayt, for everyone. If he's choosing from Al-Bayt, Ahla wa Sahlan, choosing from China, Ahla wa Sahlan. So this is the slogan of the Abbasi, but it was a popular slogan, and it's because the Al-Bayt were oppressed and were persecuted and killed badly by the Umayyad, very viciously, and there are very bloody stories there, which is really need to be. It's painful to dig them out, but I think there's no escape from digging them out and putting them on the table and studying them academically. There's no way the cover up and what has been done in Islamic history is not good. And praising by Umayyah for these achievements and so on, and covering up for these crimes. This will not benefit Islam and will not end the smog and the muddying phase. To end the smog, we have to know where the smog have come from and make a firm intention to clean the smog and clean the mud. We have to
So where has it come from? Is there any link between two?
No. This Khwarich is like a rejection movement. It's a rebellious movement, but which went overboard, went to the other extreme. The real muddying and the real smog came from the rulers, from Muawiyah onward. That's where it came from, the other scholars. Unfortunately, I have to admit that, unfortunately. But you cannot accept a corrective movement which start killing the people and destroying historic buildings and destroying artifacts and annihilating everything, claiming it has to correct everything by annihilating everything. That's not the way of doing it. The way of doing it is well described by Quran and Sunnah. If you read them and digest them so it go in the chest, become knowledge.
But isn't part of, did not the process cleanse the Kaaba of the idols, for example?
Yeah, but what has that to do with what Daesh is doing? What Daesh is destroying is not idols. Idols are different than statue is not an idol.
The Buddha in Afghanistan, for example.
It's a statue. It's a historic artifact. It's not an idol. It's an idol for those who believe that were long gone. Nobody is there worshipping it. And if someone from outside come worshipping it, let him come, or don't give him visa. It's not an idol.
So you're saying if it's currently not being worshipped, then it's acceptable to leave?
That's an example. This is a lengthy issue about historic artifacts. Simplest example: when Saud ibn Waqqas conquered Madain and entered the White Palace of Kisra, the main hall where receptions were held, he converted that temple to a masjid until the masjid was built. That hall was until the time of Tabari still with the ornamentation on the walls. Were full of statues and pictures, and they were praying there, including some Jum'ahs. Don't bother about the statues at all.
This is recorded in history?
Yeah, Tabari, go ahead, see it in Tabari. And many other things. One idiot of this so-called Salafi persuasion was saying when Morsi was elected, he would say, I hope that the first act of Morsi is to demolish this grave, the pyramid. The Sahaba came there, they did not demolish it. Abul Hol, the Sphinx, they claim it was under sand. It's impossible, because if you look at it, it is actually when the plain of Giza dips down to the valley of Nile. Nile was very broad in million years back, and start digging deeper and deeper. It came, anyway, on the shoulder of the mountain. Some part of the shoulder was protruding up, and that was carved by the old ancient Egypt into a form of the Sphinx. So the head is above the plain. So whatever sand comes will go down in the valley. It will never cover the head. The head was always apparent through history. But the lower part is sometimes covered with sand that has been removed in the Roman time. It was actually a tourist attraction in the Roman time. There was ladders and people were going around, exactly like our time, in the Roman time. This is historically recorded. And then nobody demolished that. So the Sahaba did not. So the Sahaba either idiots, all of them, some of them say they did not see it. Imagine, the Sphinx and the pyramids was not seen by the Sahaba. It must be all of them bunch of blinds. So they are blind idiots. So that's where the Salafi way of thinking goes. Based on the hadith about the hadith, the Kaabas have a special standing. It was cleansed by the idols, yes. It's only for the Kaaba and only for Hijaz and the Arab Peninsula. It's not for outside the Arab Peninsula. Sahaba went outside, did not touch any of these artifacts. And these artifacts are some of them rising in the sky. Like, for example, the artifacts in Ba'labak and in Palmyra. They are high in the sky. You can't see them with the idols and the picture. They have become statues. It's just a historic artifact. Nobody touched it, even them. Not even with a finger. And the hadith invoke that, most of them are faulty or abridged. If you get the hadith in all, they abridge. For example, the hadith of the famous hadith that Ali ibn Abi Talib sending Abu al-Hayyaj al-Asadi, I send you like the messenger of Allah sent me to deface every picture and so on. It's not every picture. It's every sanam or every watan. That's the other narration. But they don't look at all narration because they read the Quran without digesting it.
And because they don't look at everything comprehensively.
Yeah, that's it. That's a way to digest.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the Wahhabi movement earlier as well. Can you give us a brief history of the Wahhabi movement and how that came about, and specifically comment on the link between that and the collapse of the Uthmani Khilafah?
It has nothing to do with the collapse. What happened is that Muhammad ibn Wahhab started reading the books of Ibn Taymiyyah and was convinced by misreading them, actually, because Ibn Taymiyyah did not go to that extreme. He was convinced that what happens at graves, like for the saints and the awliya and so on, is act of worship. And his definition of deity is something which is being worshipped. So for him, the acts of worship are the primary thing to be defined. And the definition is with like a list. Sujood is act of worship. Touching the wall is act of worship. Standing still a certain way is act of worship. That's a list of acts. That's essentially which we discussed very extensively in the book of Tawheed. And based on that, whatever entity you direct these acts to them, it becomes then a divine entity. You declare it to be a divine. So all what the Muslims are doing at graves and so on is act of worship, and they are mushrik and they are kafir. They have idols. And he said clearly, for example, he said even in a grotesque way, for example, if you understand what I just explained previously, he says, then you see that if you have been calling, for example, one of the awliya of Najd at the time, I think he mentioned the name of one of the awliya, or Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, mentioned Abdul Qadir, then you have actually declared Abdul Qadir to be Allah, not even Ilah, Allah.
This is the view of Ibn Taymiyyah?
No. This is the view of Ibn Taymiyyah is more comprehensive in knowledge and more intelligent than to fall in such a trap. But it can be read in his if you read it in a mutilated way.
So what you're saying is that the Imam Wahhab, the way he interpreted the text of Ibn
Taymiyyah is an extreme point. It has to be either you have to abolish it from the beginning, you have to go dig to the root, or you have and declare it to be wrong. The definition that the divine being is not the things which is worship. Divine being is an entity which is act sovereignly on free will by its own power. That's a divine being. And this is supernatural because all things in the universe do not act on their sovereign power. Everything is act because of power given to him by a previous process in the universe. All your attributes and powers you have are inherited from parents. It's not from your own sovereign and your free will. You have a free will, but it's limited with the condition of the universe. If you are supernatural, then you are a divine being.
I think it's important to understand this point very clearly. What was the view of Ibn Taymiyyah, and then what was the...
Ibn Taymiyyah is wavering. Sometimes say divine being is an entity which has certain attributes as well that it's worthy of worship. So it goes in circularity. And this circularity was not understood by Muhammad ibn al-Wahhab, and he went into the death trap. But defining a divine being is the thing which is ilah is the thing which is worshipped, with the thing which is worshipped. So worshipping became primary. Human acts became primary.
And therefore they say making sujood at a qabr makes you...
It's kufr. It's kafir. You made him divine. They agree in that actually with the atheists, because the atheists
that's giving the human the ability to make something divine.
Yeah, I agree with the atheists. They say there's no divine being, because the eternal universe is not a divine being. It's not acting by free will in sovereignty. Right. It's acting by necessity, by its own laws. So there's no divine being. But human being invented divine being by their imagination. So there's no difference than the atheists. The atheists agree with that divine beings are the things you are worshipped, because there's none in existence. It's all in your imagination. You have created these mental constructs and projected them to the reality. That's essentially. And the same with the Wahhabi. The Wahhabi claim they exist because you are capable of creating divine being. Obviously, you say, no, Allah is not ilah, is not a divine being in eternity. Before creation of man, say, yeah, he is. What do you mean he is? He's worthy of worship. What do you mean worthy of worship? There was nothing worshipping him yet. What's meaning worthy of worship? He has attributes. Then the whole theory is demolished. So they go in circle. They go in circularity. But it's a nasty circularity. You have to go because since the invention of languages we use now and the history of man which is recorded, there were always divinity and divine beings and always active worship of human. And they were always so synchronized that it's very difficult to separate them logically and rationally. You have to go in a little bit in a deeper point. But if you go to the Quran and study it carefully, you will find the solution. The solution is the ayah the ayah in Surah Al-Mu'minun. ما اتخذ الله من ولد. He answers all the divinities of the mushrikeen are comprehensively refuted. ما اتخذ الله من ولد. Allah did not have any child. وما كان معه من إله. There was no deity with her. Otherwise, إذا لذهب كل إله بما خلق. Every deity will take its creation and go away, and they will overcome each other. So that's the divinity. So either you have a being which is capable of having its own creation and taking them away with its own sovereign capability by act of will, or a being which is procreated by such a being. That such a being, which is a divine, really divine, in the proper sense, in the ayah sense, in the Quran sense, cannot procreate her. That can be proven by Surah Qul Huwallahu Ahad and by other rational arguments. But it's enough because most people who claim that Allah has children and so on, they claim they have that from revelation or from traditions. Allah says clearly, I don't have a son. Why should I lie if I have a son? But it's impossible to have a son.
Just going back then to the misinterpretation of Imam Abdul Wahhab of the statements and understanding of Ibn Taymiyyah.
And everything is built on that then.
What is built on that? Explain that, please.
Everything. Everything.
Such as?
Barelwi are mushrik, all of them kafir. Shia are kafir. And the halal them, and also the misconception about that kufr will make blood worthy of shedding anyway. Only Islam or covenant can protect it.
So what you're describing, Sheikh, actually is a comedy of errors in the sense that there's a misinterpretation of perhaps a misinterpretation.
A fundamental misinterpretation, because this means that La ilaha illallah is not understood properly, which is even worse than the Khwarich of Tahkim of Ali ibn Abi Talib, much worse. There it seems to be wider because takfir declared on anyone doing a kabira, misunderstanding the difference between belief and act. Because human beings have the capability that their acts do not need to synchronize with their beliefs. You could be very well believing. You might be a medical doctor, very well believing that smoking is harmful, and still you smoke.
Yes.
Human beings have this capability.
Yeah.
We cannot declare you a kafir concerning or rejecting the fact that cigarettes are harmful. We cannot declare you this way.
So there is a separation between action and belief, is what
and belief, yeah. The separation.
But that
also usually acts are based on belief, but they are not connected. The free will is capable of.
But that distinction is not recognized by the Wahhabi movement, is what you're suggesting.
But Khwarich generally, no, it's not. That's the original Khwarich. That's their mistake.
Okay.
But the Wahhabi mistake is even graver. It is the definition of divinity. La ilaha illallah is not giving the proper definition. Reality is more catastrophic.
And because of that, they've made a mistake in the definition of worship.
Yeah, that's it. It's even more fundamental. It's even more catastrophic.
And because of that, they are able to label using that definition, their wrong definition.
Yeah.
You're saying that they're able to label other groups as, in entirety, swathes of people as non-Muslims.
Yeah, yeah.
And their further belief is, if I've understood you correctly, is that because they are now non-Muslims, their blood is halal.
Yeah.
That's quite disastrous.
That's catastrophic.
And this effectively is what we're seeing manifested today in ISIS, GIA, Pakistani Taliban, etc., etc.
ISIS or Daesh, call it number 2, ISIS 2, because we have ISIS number 1. You know which one is ISIS number 1?
I don't.
That's the first Saudi state, established with Muhammad bin Saud. It's ISIS number 1. It's exactly this one. Just read Ibn Ghannam. Ibn Ghannam, they call it in the book, printed by them. Al-Shaykh al-Imam, the Shaykh, doctor. The Shaykh is the doctor, Latin. Al-Imam, the leader. Hussein bin Ghannam, who was a student and like a friend, a junior friend of, because he's in age-wise younger than Muhammad bin Wahhab, and accompanied him the rest of his life. And later on in life, Muhammad bin Wahhab asked him to write his seerah, his biography, and this history. So this is the writing of Ibn Ghannam. It's very well conserved and it's published and printed. In it's called Ghazawat Ahl-Islam, the conquest of the people of Islam. So from the title, you know that the others are not people of Islam. If you go through that, even the printed copy, you have to put a question mark, because the printed copy, the original one was done with too much of rhyming. They're called saj'a, which is very not the modern style of writing. Like for example, al-Muslimun, al-Rahimun is like this, ending with un, an, in, trying to be like semi-poetry. So one of al-Shaykh, of his grandchildren, who lived recently, instructed Sheikh Dr. Nasser Asad from Lebanon to rewrite it in a more modern language. So he removed the saj'a. The problem with removing the saj'a, that many places where mushrikun will rhyme with Muslimun may have changed, question mark. So we don't find the word mushrikun. He declared himself, the people of Muhammad bin Saud, the people of Muhammad Wahhab, as the Muslimun. The others called the people of Riyadh, the people of this, people, without using the word mushrikun, except in few places, it's still used, especially in when it comes to the city of Sihat. Sihat is a Shia village in the eastern of Saudi Arabia. They attacked the village. The village had 1,500 people living there. That's the number he mentioned. That's not my numbers. They were all exterminated. قتلوهم جميعا. That's what he said. He doesn't mention children, or definitely 1,500 will have children. So if they قتلوهم جميعا, meaning also the children were exterminated. He doesn't mention the children explicitly, like he mentioned men or women. So we can assume the children are gone. Where are they gone? He doesn't mention the children have been adopted or sold. So they must have been exterminated or sold in slavery. I don't know what has happened there. He doesn't cover this point. And he called them clearly al-mushrikun. But we know there was there were not Shiva worshipper or Kali worshipper there. There was Shia. So for him, they are mushrikun, worthy of extermination. They were exterminated. Sihat became depopulated completely.
Okay, so is it?
And that's in the version which without saj'a, which I have question. We found an old version which is with the saj'a and so on, printed in India. We have a copy of it, but I didn't get the time to sit and see if there's the word mushrikun is used ever. But that you can by implication. If you say the Muslimun met the people of Riyadh and there was a big battle and 60 of Riyadh were killed and 20 of Muslimun were shuhada, then you can assume the people of Riyadh will be mushrikun. But assumption is not explicitly said in the printed version, which doesn't have the rhyme. So we have to go to the older version.
Is it their view that any non-Muslim can be killed?
Yeah. Unless there's a covenant. That's their view. Unfortunately, this is widespread. It's not only Wahhabi. It's unfortunately the view of many scholars, unfortunately, because they misunderstood the way the Islamic State was established in Medina and what's the relation between Muslims and kuffar. Because also
please explain that a little bit more, just for the benefit of our viewers who perhaps have only heard this view from ISIS, from the Wahhabi, well-funded Wahhabi
unfortunately, movement. Again, which was the calamity started with many scholars, is that they have neglected the ayahs which said الذين لا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق. There are various ayahs, both Madani and Makki, which says those who do not kill the nafs, the souls, which Allah has prohibited, except بالحق. Such a phrase linguistically means that fundamentally every soul, which means human soul now. Someone could extend it even to every soul and then start analyzing. But let us stick on human souls, except بالحق. So النفس التي حرم الله. So all souls are prohibited by Allah initially. إلا بالحق, except by justified reason.
So there is a concept of a just kill.
Yeah. Now, what is just kill? This is general. We don't know what's just kill. Allah is referring, look elsewhere in the Quran and look to my messenger will tell you what's just killing, what's permitted to kill. So every killing in the Quran after that mentioned must be ordered, must be part of this illa bil-haq exception.
Sure.
But this does not violate the original fundamental ruling that all souls are prohibited.
Sure. To
start with. This is very fundamental. If you understand that, it's very fundamental. Nobody can ever claim this. The only way to abrogate that the souls are initially prohibited by Allah, the only way to abrogate is say that Allah says specifically, kill all souls without restriction until I tell you otherwise. That's the only way to abrogate it. There's no other way to abrogate such a statement. Those who do not kill the souls which Allah has prohibited, except with haqq. Yeah? Do you see my point?
Yes.
There's no way, because the general fundamental ruling is that all souls are Allah has prohibited of killing. Except with haqq, which I explained to you what is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 70, 100 points.
Doesn't matter,
But it doesn't matter. But it's all exception. Must be under illa bil haqq. You have to prove it is حق. How to prove it حق? From revelation. اتبعوا ما أنزل من ربكم.
But if they were to refer to other ayahs in the Quran, for example,
That's one of the حق.
وقاتلوا حتى لا تكون فتنة ويكون الدين كله
That's a حق. But these قاتلوهم for with certain reason. We'll come to the قاتلوهم. But just generally about the bloodshed. That souls, human being, but even someone could say, because nafs is general, could be applied to animal nafs. So you cannot kill animal nafs except بالحق also.
Yeah.
Including angels, but the angels are not accessible to us to be killed, and spirits and so on.
Sure.
You are not permitted to do that, except بالحق. Good? So that's
the primary position.
That's the primary position. And this is irrefutable, and there is no way to get away from that. So the claim of the jihadi, you find, for example, in Al-Udda for jihad and so on, which is written by some jihadi, is that Al-Islam يعصم الدم والكفر يهدره. Islam protects the blood and kufr shed it. It's not true. Kufr does not shed the blood. Kufr as such doesn't shed. What shed blood is acts of war and acts of violence. That's what make blood sheddable. Now let us go how the situation between Muslims as a single person and community with the rest of the world will be, how it was.
Sure.
And for that, it's extremely important to be comprehensive and look at the seerah. And this is known to the scholar, but the problem, they made a mistake also in abrogation because of some blatant errors. Let me discuss one by one. Initially in Mecca, they were ordered not to fight. They were prohibited from fighting. Yeah?
Yes.
They were prohibited from fighting. Except the necessity for self-defense. Someone attacking you with a knife, you may defend as much as you can. That's it. But it's known by necessity. The evidence for that is from history, well established beyond doubt, but also that permission was given to fight for those who have been expelled in Mecca. The first ayah actually is maybe on the way to Medina in Surah Al-Hajj. Say, أُذِنَ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتَلُونَ بِأَنَّهُمْ ظُلِمُوا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى نَصْرِهِمْ لَقَدِيرٌ الَّذِينَ أُخْرِجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ بِغَيْرِ حَقٍّ. Permission has given to those who have been wronged. And Allah is capable of their support. Even if they have wronged in the past, Allah could have supported them, but because of the system of the universe, because of the way Allah managed the universe, He let it happen. Because this is the way the universe works. They have to take victory by themselves. They have to defend themselves later on themselves. Allah does not interfere in history except very rarely, like for Bani Israel and so on. That's not the standard. The standard is that. وإن الله حسب القدير الذين أخرجوا من ديارهم بغير حق إلا أن يقولوا ربنا الله. Those who have been expelled out of the country without justified cause. If, for example, a country kicks you out for justified cause, you are, for example, a thief, and they kick you out of the country, that's a justified cause. They don't expel you because you believe in Allah, say Rabbuna Allah, no. So you don't care, so I will fight them because expel me, no. That's not, they have the right to expel you out of the country because you are a thief or you are a gangster, for whatever reason. So that's not a justification. We say, الذين أخرجوا من ديارهم بغير حق إلا أن يقولوا ربنا الله. So that's very clear. So this permission was given. Later on, order was given to fight. قاتلوا سبيل الله الذين يقاتلونكم. Fight those who fight you. قاتلوا المشركين كافة كما يقاتلونكم, as they fight you in totality. Fight them in groups as they fight you. Fight them harshly as they fight you harshly. The same way they fight you, you fight them the same way.
Okay.
And that's all what has come. Now, the mistake have been in misunderstanding Surah Al-Tawbah, Bara'ah. When Bara'ah came, you find many scholars, including Ibn Hazm, unfortunately, who has a great mind, but unfortunately his problem with abrogation, he is very easy in abrogation. And he said this abrogated the ayat as-sayf, abrogated everything, which is not true. First of all, Bara'ah, the first part of Bara'ah, which has been sent by Ali ibn Abi Talib to read it to the people in Mecca in the 9th year, the first part goes about maybe 20 ayahs. From the beginning of the reading, which obviously Fox News mistranslates by taking only one sentence, like all people who cut things according to their desire, biased quotation. It says, Bara'atu min Allahi wa Rasulihi alladhina ahadtum mushrikin. A declaration of innocence, a declaration of separation or ending of the contracts to those mushrikeen which you have covenant with them. So it's not for other mushrikeen. Those who have covenant. How come that you have covenant mushrikeen? Those mushrikeen which have a fight before, and then you have a covenant with them. Right. Now, what's the bara'ah? Is that those who have an unlimited covenant, we're telling them it is unlimited, is abrogated, is only 4 months. We give you enough time to settle the situation and decide what to do. 4 months. And the ayats continue after that and says clearly, but those who have a time-limited covenant, they have a mudda, they have a time limit, then keep the covenant, keep the peace until the end of the covenant, as long as they fulfill their covenant and do not transgress. And then it concluded the series of ayahs encouraging the Muslims to fight the mushrikeen by saying, why don't you fight people who started in the first place and expelled you and the messenger out of your homes? That's in Bara'ah. That's not in the Makki Quran, not in early Madinah Quran, in Bara'ah itself, in the opening of Bara'ah, which was read to the people in the mushrikeen who were at that year still permitted to perform Hajj in the 9th year. When Ali ibn Abi Talib was, the first story is famous, you know the story. When Abu Bakr was commanded him to be the Imam of the Hajj that year, which is one of the strongest evidence that Abu Bakr is like hinted to be the Imam after the Prophet. And then when he was on the way, the Prophet sent Ali ibn Abi Talib after him. So when Ali came, Abu Bakr was amazed what Ali is doing. Say, I'm ordered to read Bara'ah to the Nas. Say, are you commanded to be a leader or Amir or Ma'mur? Are you a commander of the Hajj? Or no, say, I'm Ma'mur, I'm under you, I'm just a reporter. So Abu Bakr was not happy with this, so he came back to the Prophet and asked, what's happened? Say, Jibreel came said, because the Arab tradition, nobody can report from me except somebody from my family. They will say, Abu Bakr, if I send you the ayah, to say Abu Bakr is not a relative of the, is not from Bani Hashim, is not a relative of the Prophet. How can he report on his behalf? According to the Arab way of thinking. And usually Allah takes care of these human sensitivity in his revelation. Out of kindness, he's not obliged. He could have sent Abu Bakr. So, and Ali went around and broadcast that after this, the last year for Mushrikeen to perform, there's no Hajj anymore for the Mushrikeen anymore. It's only for Muslims. And also, no naked person should do tawaf around the Kaaba this year and never in the future, etc. Immediately. And the Mushrikeen next year. And the reading Bara'ah so that the people who have unlimited covenant will know it is terminated after 4 months. So that's the context of Bara'ah. So it doesn't abrogate anything. It's mentioned the same thing which I've mentioned before. It's fighting those who fight you. Some people may invoke the hadith, which is also mutawatir. أمرت أن أقاتل الناس حتى يشهدوا أن لا إله إلا الله وأني رسول الله. Have been ordered to fight the people until they witness لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله. But this cannot be in its generality. It's restricted by the other evidences. For example, we know that he can take jizya from the people. So this is a restriction, which the hadith does not mention. Yeah. Why does it mention? Because it's mentioned elsewhere. Sure. There's no single hadith, no single phrase would contain all the law. Sure. You have to refer to the other sentences. Sure. To that. And the same, now the people say the Muslim declared war on the Persian and they started the war, initiated. They call it jihad al-talab. They extend their country. That's not true. The truth is the following question, but that's what shows that historically how people have misunderstood the seerah and did not take the seerah in. And this seerah mutawatir is not a single report which you can say, we don't know what the isnad, how faulty it is. It's mutawatir. The Prophet sent messengers carrying the message, peaceful messenger, to Persia and to the Roman and so on. We know what the Persian emperor did. Kisra, he tore the letter, and the Prophet supplicated that Allah may tear his kingdom, and that was accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and his kingdom was torn. Not only that, people do not know that. He sent to his deputy king in Yemen, Bazan, sent 2 strong men to this man who claimed to be a prophet, so they apprehend him, so it's like a criminal, get that criminal, and interrogate him, and tell him to cease claiming to be a prophet, otherwise strike his neck.
So it's an act of war.
Act of war. So they came. They came to Taif. I will mention the story just for the benefit and enjoyment of our listener, even the non-Muslim one. They came to Taif, and they said, "Where is Muhammad?" Completely unworried about what's going on. So the Prophet said, "No, he's in Medina." And the Prophet said, "We're jubilating. The king of kings, Kisra, is now pursuing Muhammad. You don't need to worry. Muhammad is finished. He will be gone. Khalas." So they went to Medina. They came to the Prophet ﷺ and discussed with him a few things. That our Lord ordered to do this, and we take you to Yemen, and you should stop these claims. Kings do not like these claims. He said, "Come tomorrow, obviously by wahi. I will tell you what's my answer to that." So they went, but they saw the respect for Sahaba, how they respect the Prophet, so they were shivering of fear. So they brought him next day. The Prophet gave them some gifts. One of them is having the gift still. The descendants may have it until today. I don't know, because these Persian embraced Islam and became Yemeni, and they're still now called Abna. Abna means the Abna Faris, the sons of Faris. So if you see someone called Abnawi, it's not a tribe, it's the Abna Faris, the sons of Faris. It became like a tribe. And then the morning say, "You said your Lord sent it." He said, "My Lord, Allah, killed your Lord yesterday. His son, Qubad, killed him this way and this way. or note the time and go back to Bazan and tell him that. So they went back. Obviously, during the journey, the news came to Bazan. Most likely, the news came after they arrived. So they told Bazan, this man, we are shocked that we survived. He gave us gifts. He was very nice. He was very lovely. You sent us to a trap. We thought it's the criminal sitting somewhere. We came with a delegation. Obviously, not these 2 men. This is a cool caravan, maybe with a military guard and so on. But this is the state. This is a powerful entity. And he claimed this. See, and they told him, listen, watch what you are saying. You are saying something very grievous, that his own son killed him. Wake up, because they know that son was in prison, actually. He escaped the prison a few days before. They were unaware about all of these stories. So what you're saying is completely outrageous. Say, go back and you see. So Badal said, if that's true, then he must be receiving from heaven, because we have no information yet. Say, next day or a few days later, the messenger came with us. Bazan and all the Abna Faris embraced Islam, and Yemen came in Islam because of this miracle. Anyway, so these are acts of war. And then there were attacks after that. The same with the Romans. People say the Roman Empire was not guilty. One of the messengers was to the Roman, not the Roman themselves, because the Hercules were intelligent enough to treat the letter with respect and put it in a box and so on. It's lost. Maybe we'll find one day in some ruins, Allah Alam. But it's lost for all practical purposes. Because some of the letters are not lost. The letter to Al-Mundhir ibn Sawi in Bahrain is still, a sheet of it was found. Anyway, some of his vassal kings, Arab kings in the north, they received also messages, and in the message to Hercules, a very significant statement was said. That's in the book of Amwal of Abu Ubaid. He brings the same narration. There's an added phrase which you don't find in the others, so to show how important to get all the narrations. In that added phrase, it says, if you don't accept Islam, no problem. This is your choice for yourself. You are damaging yourself. But let me bring the message to the common people. Let me have the freedom of da'wah. Clearly, that cannot be tolerated by the Roman Empire or by the church at that time. And the local kings, the Arabs in the north, when he sent the da'iyah to them, they were killed. And that's the reason the Battle of Mu'tah was initiated. So there was no attack to the people. Evidence for that, irrefutable evidence, which makes that absolutely clear, that Abyssinian, where the da'wah was open and there was no prosecution, actually Muslim was protected by the Najashi, there was no war. Neither the time of the Prophet, nor the time of Abu Bakr, nor the time of Umar, nor the time of Uthman, nor the time of Ali. Until the end of Bani Umayyah. There was no skirmish or war. There was the best relation, peaceful, perfect peace, tranquility, trade, interaction. There was only the Habasha were mentioned in war in only 2 or 3 occasions. One occasion, time of the Prophet, in the 10th year, the people of Jeddah, near Mecca, they noticed there was an island. The island is no more there. Maybe it is underwater. Flat over here. So the water level has increased during the 1,000-something years. A ship came, a stray ship, and people far away, they can see the people. From the general shape, they guessed they are Abyssinian. But it could be Nubian. Because, you know, the Nubian, South Egypt, and Abyssinia, they're separated by 1,500 miles, kilometer, maybe miles. And they look similar because semi-Semitic. Yeah. It's not like Zinj, it's not like Negros with the features. So they saw they're Abyssinian, and they never came to Jeddah, and nobody of Jeddah dared going to them to see what they are. So they wrote to Medina. So it took some time. They were settling in that small island. Wrote to Medina to the Prophet, and the Prophet said a battle campaign. When they crossed to them, they ran away and disappeared. No news about them came ever. Most likely because Jeddah is opposite to the south of north of Sudan, south of Egypt. It may be Nubi, or maybe just pirates of the sea. You never know who they are. Nobody knows what they are. In the time of Uthman, some guys of this type attacked also Jeddah and did some killing and so on. So Uthman wrote to the Najashi at the time, asking what has happened. And Najashi checked all the villages in his kingdom and wrote to Uthman back that we checked, nobody is from us. It must be from elsewhere. But we instructed everyone never to go to the Arabia and do any problems. So it is not from the Najashi, not even from the real Abyssinians. It may be from the Nubians, because the Nubians were hostile. The third time the word Habasha is used in a battle is when they say that Abdullah ibn Sa'd ibn Sarh, the ruler of Egypt, had a battle campaign toward Habasha. He could not be, because he was the ruler of Egypt and he went down to Nubia. It's not a Habasha, not the Abyssinian kingdom of Najashi, of the Negus. So that's the only mention. There was no. I mentioned that just for historic honesty. Someone who can almost said there was never skirmish with any Habasha. These three instances with the word Habasha, the clear interpretation for it must be Nubians, which is clearly from the geography. You look at the map, Jeddah is here, and this is the north of Sudan, so maybe have crossed the sea. Maybe there are fissures which have been thrown by a wind. Nobody knows, because they went. That's the time of the Prophet. The one who did mischief at the time, Uthman wrote to the Najashi. They said, we have never ordered anything like that. If it's done by criminal people, we will apprehend them and punish them. And he checked all his kingdom, which is quite big. Actually, it's not the whole Abyssinia of today. It's more like Eritrea and part of Addis Ababa and so on, not the whole area. Maybe half of it. But this is a considerable kingdom. He checked all the kingdom. Nobody is aware about anything like that. So it must be from the Nubian. And then Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh, and he has a covenant with the Nubians, which persists for hundreds of years. So that's all whatever happened. So with Abyssinia was everything like, as they say, milk and honey. Businesses were going back and forth. They were trading. They were coming back and forth without any mentioning any austerity at all, which shows where da'wah is permitted, and the da'wah was permitted there. In Abyssinian, Muslims were protected initially under Najashi, and the da'wah was protected, and Islam spread slowly and peacefully over hundreds of years there, without any problem. So this is clear evidence. This plus this, and the clear hadith. وادعوا الحبشة ما ودعوكم, be peaceful. Muwada'a is being peaceful without any covenant, just basic initial peace, which we have now, for example, with all Latin American states. We have never had any confrontation with them. They never were occupying any Muslim countries, nor were we ever having any war with them. No. The South American, Sweden, for example, and North Europe, we never had any conflict with them. So we could say we are in a muwada'a with them. We don't need to have even a treaty. It's a state of muwada'a, and there's no issues with da'wah carried by to them, so there's absolutely no problem. So the Prophet says, وَادِعُوا الْحَبَشَةَ مَوَادَعَ وَاتْرُكُوا التُّرْكَ, leave the Turks as long as they leave you. So this, all of that, if you take you that, it's clearly that the attacks against the Persian Empire is really because they started the war, and the war never settled by any suitable treaty. The only settlement that happened is with the Romans later, when they were squeezed almost around Constantinople, and with the Persian Empire, when the Persian Empire collapsed completely because they were too arrogant to have any settlement. They were offered their settlement, including jizya, including many things. They refused.
So just to summarize, then, you're saying that the default position between an Islamic
is
state
peace,
and any other entity is peace, unless they are attacked.
Unless they attack, and the attack will be either killing Muslims or expelling them out of the country, or preventing da'wah by force, by killing messengers and so on.
Right.
Which is nowadays not a problem. Da'wah in most places in the world clearly is not a problem. Yeah. It may be a problem in some places, like Burma now and so on. Maybe. It has to be studied, everyone on its own merit. But that's the fundamental position. And the fundamental ruling about blood is protected.
Would Daesh not argue that actually they are being attacked?
We are not discussing Daesh in the first place. So Daesh is not even a state entity, neither in creation nor in initiation. But we leave that maybe
we'll discuss it
by itself, because this is in a matter of Daesh, what do you mean is attacked? For example, they were not attacked by the groups which are fighting Bashar. They attacked the groups in Syria, for example. Just to answer this point, they attacked the groups. The procedure which was going on, the Daesh came from Iraq, jumped over to Syria, uninvited. Instead of fighting Bashar and helping the other fighting groups, they come to, for example, it was a procedure, they come to a village which has been taken by the Thawar, the revolutionary, the Mujahideen, whatever you call them, and then they put checkpoints with people who are masked. And the other Mujahideen don't want conflict because they are worried to shed Muslim blood. And based on the weakness of the other groups, we advise them, by the way, in our radio broadcast, I advise the other groups, just exterminate them. They are Khwarich. They will kill you one day. They refuse. No, A'udhu Billah. And Daesh said, Al-Mas'ari is a bloodshedder in London. He is under the protection of the Queen and calling for our bloodshed, A'udhu Billah minha, and so on. Allah protect from his evil, etc. And ultimately, they expel the other group and take over the place, claiming that we are the state, we have the right to take it over. So
we'll examine that, I'm sure.
We'll examine that and the evidence of that and so on.
Sheikh, Jazakallah khair. It's been an absolute education speaking to you today, and I look forward to our next discussion, inshallah.
بإذن الله تعالى إن شاء الله.